Welcome to the Seek Insights online event. This platform is a learning series designed to assist entrepreneurs and professionals in learning and development, as well as providing a platform to interact and engage the top 3% business, marketing, and technology talent in the world. We would like to help you access rare insights so you can thrive in your industry. Today, Dr. Mark Goulston is a keynote speaker and the creator of 360-degree aspirational executive coaching. He's an advisor and confidant to entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs from startups to the Fortune 500. He's one of the world's foremost experts on empathetic listening, with his book, Just Listen, Discover the Secret to Getting Through to Absolutely Anyone, being translated into 24 languages and becoming the top book on listening in the world, and a topic he speaks on globally. The Russian edition of his book, Talking to Crazy, How to Deal with the Irrational and Impossible People in Your Life, became a bestseller and went viral in that country. He is the author of 5 more books and appears frequently in all media as a subject area expert, and is the host of My Wakeup Call podcast. In that podcast, he uses surgical empathy with his guests to drill into their purpose and calling in life, and then has them tell their story with wake-up calls that led them there. He has been a UCLA assistant clinical professor of psychiatry for 20 plus years, and for more than 30 years he was a clinical psychiatrist focused on suicide prevention, with none of his patients dying by suicide. His principal approach was surgical empathy, a field that he has also created. He's a co-creator and moderator of a multi-honored documentary, Stay Alive, an intimate conversation about suicide prevention. He is also a former FBI and police hostage negotiation trainer. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mark, and thanks for taking time out of your busy day. Today we'll be talking around how to think like Elon Musk. Would you like to take over and just introduce yourself, and we can get into it?
Well, I'm going to have to reduce that bio. I almost fell asleep listening to myself there be talked about. So
Sure.
it's good to be here. But something I want to introduce, and then we can get into the Elon Musk thing. I spoke in Moscow, and I introduced my latest thinking on how to listen effectively. And I was privileged because I headlined with a Nobel Prize winner named Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. But what I focused on, and if you're an entrepreneur, and you can use this in any of your relationships, and I'm going to use it with the two of you right now, is if you can focus on what other people are listening for. So a lot of times in regular conversations, people are listening to you. You're listening to me. I could rattle off a bunch of bullet points, and you'll say, well, that's interesting. Maybe we'll follow them. But if I focus on what you're listening for, people are drawn to you. So let me see if I get what you're listening for. What I think you're listening for is you value the trust of your listeners and viewers. In fact, you don't want to disappoint them.
Definitely.
And you're listening for something that they can use immediately, like today, to make their lives better. You're listening for something that's really simple and usable by them. They don't have to buy a book. They don't have to take a course. They're very busy. And so you're listening for something that they can do immediately and get great results. And you're also listening for someone who may be an expert, but is awful. And you have to then tell that expert, geez, we love your book, but we can't post the podcast. I'm sorry. So you want to give value and you want to protect your listeners. So am I getting it right? Is that what you're listening for?
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
If people are listening and watching, that was an example of how you want to tune in to your market and what they're listening and looking for. One of the problems with a lot of people in technology, especially, is we get so excited about our technology or our new restaurant that we started, that we love our technology, we love our restaurant, but we don't check out whether anyone else is going to like it. Because what happens is we get so excited about what we have, and sadly, we'll put a lot of money into something that is not going to succeed. And so as we switch over to how to think like a visionary, how to think like Elon Musk, a couple of years ago, I toured playing Steve Jobs coming back from the dead. I had the turtleneck on, I had the glasses on, and 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 the cornerstone of that talk. And if you're listening in, if I'm guessing you're going to write this down because almost everyone writes it down. The main part of that talk was what you want to trigger in other people is whoa, W-H-O-A, wow, W-O-W, H-M-M-M, yes, whoa, wow, yes. And what the whoa stands for, I can't believe what I just saw, heard, read, or felt. So it breaks through people's crowded minds. That's the whoa. And then the wow is they think, this is unbelievable. This is astonishing. This is amazing. And then the is, this is too good not to use. I don't know how I'm going to use it, but this is too good not to use. And then the yes is, I figured out how to use it, sold. And in my talk where I played Steve Jobs, the way I demonstrate the whoa, wow, yes, is I actually show a video, and people listening in can find it. If you look up Steve Jobs Xerox PARC, and that's P-A-R-C, Geographic, Steve Jobs Xerox PARC, National Geographic, you'll find a dramatization of his visiting Xerox and discovering the mouse, discovering the graphical user interface. And when you look at the video, it's only about a minute and a half, you'll see the expression on the person playing Steve Jobs' face. So initially, Steve Jobs, and this could be Elon Musk, they can be a little arrogant, and so they're skeptical. So their view is, okay, what are you going to show me? And then when Steve Jobs sees the mouse at Xerox PARC, he leans in, and you can see in his eyes, he's thinking, whoa, what is that? And then what happens is he says to the technician in the video, can I try it? So you see him, he gets there, and there's music behind it. And then when he touches the mouse, the music goes up and he starts to sweat. And so that's, wow, I can't believe this. And then in the video, he's turning to his co-founder, Steve Wozniak, who was really the technologist. And the look was to say, what do you think? And in this video clip, the real Steve Wozniak says, when he looked at me, I said, once they use the mouse, they're not going back to typing. So that was the and the video ends where the author of one of the Steve Jobs books, Walter Isaacson, said, Xerox didn't know what to do with this, but Steve Jobs went back to Apple and created the Macintosh. So the whole purpose of my actually doing that whole presentation playing Steve Jobs was to show people that moment. This is what Elon Musk does too. There was a part of him that could see electricity, electric cars, and there was a part of him that went, whoa, I think we can get batteries that actually work in cars. And then the wow is, I think if we do that, people are going to buy electric cars. They failed before, but I think they're going to buy it this time. And then he brought together the best team about how to do it. And then Tesla is now the most valuable auto company in the world. So do you see what I'm saying? Now, what does it take to think like a visionary? Here's another thing that you might want to write down because you might not be a visionary. Visionaries see the unknown as an adventure to be lived, as opposed to something dangerous to be avoided. A visionary sees the unknown as an adventure to be lived, as opposed to a danger to be avoided. And why do they see it as an adventure to live? Because part of their makeup is all through their life, they've looked into the unknown and seen things that other people don't see. And I think what they've seen naturally is instinctively, they have a sense of what's going to cause people to go, whoa, wow, yes. And by the way, if you're an entrepreneur, because I consult to companies about their marketing, if you think of marketing is the chance to make a sale. So marketing isn't selling. Marketing is drawing people in, getting them interested enough so that you then have the chance to make a sale. You should go to your website. I help companies with their websites. And I say, put yourself in the shoes of the other person, what they're looking for, what they're listening for. And if everything they see, hear, or read about you doesn't trigger, whoa, wow, yes, fix it. Because you have a very short, chance to hold their attention. And by the way, some of you listening in, if you're entrepreneurs, might say, well, I'm not sure that I can do that. So when I work with companies, I say, let's bring your team together. And then you have people sharing the experiences from their life of a whoa, wow, yes moment. So I'm going to ask the two of you, I'm going to put you both on the spot. Think of something, from your life or your careers that when you saw it, you went, whoa, I can't believe what I just saw. I can't believe what I just heard. So can you each share something?
Are you referring in reference to marketing, Mark, or just in general?
In general.
I think tragedy, sorry, I know I'm going to a dark place, but tragedy, for instance, for me in 2014, sorry, when my dad passed, because it was an accidental passing. So I think I was like, whoa, wow. Not yes, but just generally, whoa, wow. It was a bit of a disbelief. So I hate to go the dark route, but that I would say was a huge, game changer in my life.
Yeah. And for you,
Phumzile,
how about you?
I'll say for me, it was when I went bungee jumping in PE. When I got there, I was like, whoa, because you see it on the website and you don't think it's that long, way down. And I was there. But when I was doing it, you're like, wow, what a thrilling feeling. And then you go, like you wonder, how can you recreate this again? Because you're not going to go jump there all the time. It was that for me. It was when I went bungee jumping. That for me, it was an experience that I'll not do it again, but it was quite thrilling.
And so what you're saying is, how can I recreate this? And if I wanted to be successful in business, how can I recreate this for my customers and clients?
Yeah.
And so what happened is the marketing there must have been something that grabbed your attention to try it. It was exciting. It was daring. It was dangerous. It was something you had to do. It was one of those things on your bucket list. I've got to do this before I die, and it might kill me, and it might be a very short thing. But if you're listening in, I think you're giving a good example of that. And also for you, Samke, it's interesting you brought up a dark thing, because I'm now writing 2 books, and they'll be out, I think, in winter for HarperCollins. And one of them is how to recover from COVID-19 PTSD for healthcare workers.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them have just been seeing too much death that they're not used to. They're having to, do FaceTime with a dying mom or dad with their children because they couldn't come into the hospital. So part of the whoa, wow, yes, there's going to be a lot of people after this pandemic, at least in America, hopefully when the danger eventually passes, instead of their being relieved, they're going to have PTSD, because all the stuff that they pushed down in order to survive is going to come back up.
Yeah.
So the is, so the whoa, wow is these are wonderful people. And for them to not be able to recover from it after sacrificing their lives to help other people, that would be a double tragedy. And so that's what the book's about. The is there's got to be a way to help them recover from the PTSD they're going to have. And then the yes is, let's write the thing. So that's what we're doing now.
Great.
So if you're listening in, I think it's a good thing. Something else, when I talk about how to think like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, there's another quality that both of them have. And the quality is they are passionate about divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is creative thinking. And they're also passionate about convergent thinking. And convergent thinking is, how do we think way out in the universe and bring it back into a product that we can sell? And they're two different energies. And a lot of times, if you're too creative, you drive everyone crazy because every day you come up with a new idea.
Yep.
And then you try to get your team, and after a while, your team stops because they think you're going to come up with a new idea every week. You drive your team crazy. And the point is, if you're overly creative like that, you're just too excited by the creativity. But then you flip to something else. And on the other hand, if you're too focused on being convergent, if you're just focusing on the detail, you can kill off the creativity. So anybody who knows about the history of Apple, way back when, Apple fired Steve Jobs and they brought in a very convergent thinker, John Sculley. And it's because the board at Apple couldn't tolerate Steve Jobs' just divergence. I mean, he's very creative, but they couldn't manage him. And at that time, he was very arrogant. And he thought, of course, if he put it to a vote, of course, the board would want to keep him instead of the person he brought in, John Sculley. But the board, who cared about shareholders, who cared about, their financial responsibilities to shareholders, they went with Sculley. And Sculley was a decent guy, but he wasn't the creative that Steve Jobs is. Now, if you're listening in, Tim Cook is not a creative. Tim Cook's the CEO of Apple, but the key is you can be the CEO and you don't have to be super creative, but what you have to do is bring in creative people and let them be your visionary. So one of the people that Steve Jobs turned to was Johnny Ive. I think that's his first name. And he was the designer. So Steve Jobs would have an idea, but I think that's his name, Johnny Ive. He would design it. And for a long time, Johnny Ive stayed with Apple, and I think he's recently left. And so what happened is after Steve Jobs died, Tim Cook, the CEO, could go to Johnny Ive and say, so what do you think? So if you're an entrepreneur, don't beat up on yourself that you have to be the visionary. You just need to know that your company needs visionaries, but you have to manage the visionary in your company because they'll drive everyone crazy.
Yeah, that's interesting that you put it that way, because a lot of people would assume that in order for you to be either be a startup founder or an entrepreneur, you would be the one that would have to drive all of the visionary thinking. So it's interesting that you put it that way, Mark.
Well, it's interesting. I'm one of the people I'm coaching now. He's the CEO of a gaming company. I can't mention it, and we just had this discussion yesterday, and he said, and I tried to drill into what his special ability is, and he just took it for granted because he just thought, I don't think it's anything special, but he has the ability to be really creative in the gaming world, but he has to also turn it into a business that makes money for the shareholders. And he said, it was interesting. He said, if I wanted to just be creative, we could create games that will excite the world. But if I don't think of this as like a business, we're going to run out of money, because to be a successful business, you're often having to pivot, and you're often having to cut costs, and you're often having to cut costs by cutting people because they just don't fit where you're going. And that's a very difficult decision. There's something else that one of the books that I'm writing on, leading through crisis and change. So one of the books is about recovering from PTSD. The other one's about how to lead through a world that is never going to stop changing. So change is continuous. And I'll share this part from that book. One of the things we talk about, and this is important if you're an entrepreneur, is we call it, you need to prepare for the future. And it's PRE dash capital PARE. And what the pre means is, in a changing world, you need to accept that you may have to change the way you think about things. Because sometimes, there's this definition of insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting it to keep working. And so the pre is, in a changing world, you may be uncomfortable changing the way you think, but you're going to have to. And what PARE stands for, PARE, is pivot, align, resolve, execute. What does pivot mean? Well, pivot means having to change your mind. So if you're going in one direction and the world is changing, or there's no market for what you have, you're going to have to pivot in your mind. And then align is, after you pivot, you're going to have to get all your people to go along with you because they were doing something else. And the R is, you're going to have to resolve the conflicts that will stop you from doing both of those. So internally, it is tough to pivot in our mind if we're doing one thing and we're really excited about it, but it no longer works, and we have to move in another direction. That can be very scary and challenging. So you have to be able to resolve that conflict in order to pivot in your mind. And then you have to resolve the conflict with your people, because if they're going in one direction and suddenly you have to get them to align with you, how are you going to get them to do that? And in the book, we talk about that. And then E is, after you've done that, execute. Okay, now act. So if you're an entrepreneur, I think that's also a good thing to remember. And Steve Jobs and Elon Musk are excellent at being able to pivot, align. And one of the ways they've been able to resolve the conflict is that when they see something clearly, they can see the future that nobody else sees. When Steve Jobs saw that mouse and the graphical user interface, he saw this changes everything. People are going to be able to use a mouse, and they're not going to have to type. So he was able to make that pivot in his mind, and then go back to Apple and then get people to align with that. And Elon Musk does the same thing. So does that give you kind of a taste? Does that give you sort of a taste of how visionaries work?
Yeah, and I think going back to the point that you made, which was visionary see the unknown as an adventure to be lived, as opposed to a danger to be avoided. What are possibly the other aspects of thinking like a visionary that perhaps people may not know?
So there is a term. I've been blessed to have 7 mentors, and they've all passed away. And I love mentoring myself, not mentoring myself, but mentoring other people. And my last mentor was this fellow named Warren Bennis. And if you look up leadership in Warren Bennis, he's probably one of the top 10 people who ever lived with regard to leadership. And he shared an expression with me that he got from an American playwright named Saul Bellow. And the expression, and you can look it up, Saul Bellow, Bellow. And what Saul Bellow said is, be a first-class noticer. Because noticing is different than looking, watching, and seeing. So for instance, with you, Samke, I just noticed that when I said that, you took it in and you tried it out in your mind. I saw you in your mind going, noticing. What's that about? So I noticed that got through to you. And so being a first-class noticer is you actually connect with whatever you're noticing. And that's why I'll circle back to what we talked about at the beginning, is if you can notice what people are listening for, or just be curious about it instead of trying to sell them what you have. So I did an exercise in Moscow, and that's up on YouTube. I guess if you look up my name, Mark Goulston, on YouTube, you'll see it. And I did this crazy exercise. So I'm there in front of 1,000 Russians. I'm speaking English. It's being translated in Russian. And I looked at them and I actually pulled out something called a talking stick. I can't get to it. It's in my room. But it's a talking stick is a tribal stick that it comes from American Indians. And so when you would bring the tribal chiefs together, whoever held the talking stick got to talk and everybody else had to listen. And so I'm there in front of 1,000 Russians holding this talking stick. They're looking at me like I'm crazy. And I tilt it like this. And I say, I'm using it as a listening stick. And let me see if I get what you're listening for. So here's an example, but it's an example of how I got this whole Russian audience to lean into me in American. I'm not a Nobel Prize winner, and I said, let me see if I get what you're listening for. Your senior managers or your CEOs. So what you're listening for is that I will give you something that will help you get better measurable results, because you're judged on measurable results. Is that true? And they go, duh, yes. And I said, the second thing that you're listening for is that I will give you something that you can use immediately right now to get those results. And you don't have to buy a book. You don't have to take a course. There's no upsell. Just the cost of your coming to this conference and giving us your time will be enough. So you're listening for something that you can use immediately to get those results. Is that true? Yes. And you're also listening for something that is doable by you, where you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a psychologist. So you're listening for something that is really simple that you can use. Is that true? And they all went, oh, duh, you got us. So if you're an entrepreneur, so here's a tip, because I coach entrepreneurs on how to get investors to give them money. So I will tell you what investors are listening for. And this is what you want to bring out in the conversation, is you want to get them to regret saying no more than they regret saying yes. So I'll say that again. See, a lot of investors come in and they're skeptical. They're afraid that if they say yes, it's not going to work out. Or if they say yes, their boss is going to say, why did you invest in that? This is a piece of junk. And the reason they're afraid to say yes is because they don't want to buy something and then have their boss say, this was a mistake. What were you thinking? And the reason they regret saying that is because they've invested in the past and it hasn't worked out and their boss has criticized them. So are you following me? Now, what you want them to do is to regret saying no more than they regret saying yes. And what would be an example of their regretting saying no? Well, what they're also listening for is, well, if I say no to this and someone else invests in it and we miss out on it and it's a big success, my boss is going to be really upset at me that I said no to it.
Mm.
And so what you really want to bring out is a possible investor being afraid to say no. Now, what would cause them to be afraid to say no? For instance, imagine an investor. They go back to their boss and they say, oh, I saw something today and I'll tell you what it did to me, but I did, to be honest, I went, whoa, wow, yes. Well, what was it? That was this guy, he looked like a hippie. He hadn't washed himself. He has this computer and he has like a mouse. I don't know what a mouse is. And he showed it and I thought, well, that's cute. But I said no to it. We're technologists. We don't buy cute. So I passed on this thing called Apple. That investor is going to get fired about 4 years later. So do you follow me? What you really want to do is make sure that you're creating whoa, wow, yes. And that goes back to another thing, if you want to think like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. And here's another thing you're going to write down. You want to be compelling to open people's minds, and you want to be convincing to close the deal. And what will open people's minds? Whoa, wow, yes, opens people's minds. So the problem is that a lot of people who are into technology, they're often engineer types, and they don't really understand whoa, wow, yes. So they start trying to convince people as soon as they have a conversation. And when you try to convince someone before you've opened their minds, even if they go, yeah, I get this, they're going to nod, but they're not going to buy. And the reason they're not going to buy is because when you try to convince someone too soon, you're taking away from them their choice to choose to do something with you. And most people, especially men got a bad case of this, but if you try to force something on a man and he has to do it, he's not going to choose to do it. That's right. If you have a man in your life and you want him to do an errand around the house, you better figure out a way to get him to choose to do it, because if you tell him he should do it, he's not going to do it. Don't tell me what to do. So, but there are ways to be compelling.
Yeah.
In fact, since I'm with two lovely young women, I'm going to give you a tip for how to get a man to do what you want them to do. Is that okay?
Sure. Pums, do you agree?
I hope you show the video, because I just got a whoa wow from both of them. So here's the way to open a man's mind. I'm going to lean in. You can lean in. See, now they're also first-class notices. I finally got their attention. I got the whoa, wow going on here. I got the first-class noticing. This is cool. So what you say to the man in your life, you could say, I need your help with something. but you have to say it in a calm voice. You can't say, I need your help, because that'll make them nuts. You say, I need your help with something. And they're going to say, what? Then you say, going forward, if there's something I need you to do, and it's important to me, what's the best way to approach you so I don't sound like a nag? I don't sound like I'm trying to control you. I don't sound like I'm criticizing you. Going forward, what's the best way to approach you if there's something I need you to do, I'd like you to do? And I'd like us to avoid an argument. And then whatever they say, you look at them and say, thank you, this is really important. Let me repeat back what you just said to me. So is what you just said to me, what you want, the best way to do it is for me to say, is this a good time to ask you about something that I'd like you to do? So maybe they'll say that to me so that I can switch gears in my head. I don't know what they'll say. But what you do is you repeat it back to them and then say, is that what you said? Because I don't want to get it wrong. And they may switch it a little bit. Well, I didn't say exactly. And you can say, well, tell me exactly what you said. And then they're going to say it. And you wait for them to say, yes, you got it. And then you say, good, thank you. And then when it's time to ask them to do something, look a little nervous. And look a little nervous so they say, what's the matter? Say, remember we had a conversation about a week ago about asking you to do something that I need you to do, and I want to avoid an argument, and I think this is what you told me. And then you repeat. They say, yeah. You could say, it's one of those times, and I don't want to have an argument. And so what you're being is respectful. You're also being vulnerable without being needy. When you say, I need your help with something, that's respectful, but you're being open. And then when you say going forward, you're preparing for it to happen later on. And by the way, you don't want to go through that and say, good, I'm going to ask you something right now. No, two separate conversations.
Yeah.
And so if you're an entrepreneur, I mean, this is what I coach entrepreneurs is how do you gain people coming towards you? And you mentioned in that long introduction, which I'm going to have to reduce. It's just too long. But what surgical empathy is when you get through to someone with the purpose of making a connection with them. So you also mentioned, I don't do this anymore, even though I'm part of 2 documentaries, but I was a specialist in suicide prevention, and none of my patients killed themselves. But what I would do is I would go where they were in their hopelessness, and I would keep them company in their hopelessness instead of trying to tell them all these things to do, which everybody else had already told them. And when they just felt that I was keeping them company in their hopelessness, they started to cry with relief. And so I didn't make them cry, I let them cry. And when they started to cry with relief, they started to calm down. And then when they calmed down, we could talk about what to do about it. And in fact, what I would do with them is I'd say, and I saw people who had made multiple attempts, and I said, would it be okay with you if I didn't give you any advice? Would it be okay with you if I didn't give you any solutions? Because you've already had advice and solutions, and you're back seeing another psychiatrist. And they'd look at me and they'd be very interested in this. They'd look at me, so that was compelling. They'd say, you got my interest. And then I'd look them in the eye and I'd say, what I'd like to do is find you when you're feeling your worst and keep you company there so that you're not alone. Would that be okay? And you can see my voice is changing. And they'd look at me and they'd start to cry. And what would happen is, I know that as they'd start to cry, that they were feeling relief. And then I would go even, and I would dig deeper. That's the surgical empathy. That's going into the hopelessness and getting it all to come out. Visit me at markgoulston.com, markgoulston.com. And I have a podcast called My Wakeup Call. And the conversations are all like this one, except I do more listening. And people just open up.